Okay, well, good morning. And so we want to start with some follow-up items from last Wednesday, specifically on grievance, discipline, drugs, and alcohol. So I'm going to ask Liz to walk us through those.
Good morning, everyone. And I am going to start with, I don't see Ricky here, so in any event, we'll start with drugs and alcohol. And just wanted to get back to the point you all made to us, and I'm sorry, you good? Yep, everybody. The point you made to us with regard to CBD oils and the potential use, given the proposal we got from you was an exception for marijuana. We heard in the last discussion that we had from you that you were concerned about potential things that folks were using potentially for pain management, that sort of thing. And so went back through and looked at the provisions involving the MRO. And if we look at Section 4, subsection F, it specifically provides for the results, before the results of a drug test may be used as a basis for any action, an MRO will be employed to determine if the test result is positive due to illicit drugs or prescribed or over-the-counter drugs or food substances. In the event the MRO determines laboratory analysis found in the specimen to be positive, but the circumstances leading to the test result were other than illicit drug use, the test will be reported as a negative to the city. So we believe that accounts for the scenario that you outlined for purposes of CBD oil, among many other options, which is that back and forth and effectively that interactive engagement with the MRO regarding a positive test for marijuana. The other thing that we wanted to address in response, and this is the new language that's inserted in Section 5, was the point about the synthetic drugs that we've included as part of the testing. We know that the thresholds that were included were not doable by the lab during the pendency of this current contract. And so we didn't want to put ourselves back in the position of having a standard that isn't doable, and as a result, those particular substances aren't part of the panel that gets tested for. So you had mentioned that your members want to know, well, what are those thresholds? And effectively, it's the lab that sets those thresholds to determine whether or not those synthetics end up showing up as a positive on the panel. So what we've inserted to address that is that we will get what those thresholds are from the lab and make those available. So you'll see that as a new insertion in Article 29.
This is just a typo. Okay.
I'll go ahead and go next, unless you have any questions on Article 29, to disciplinary actions. And the proposal that you gave us, which was an April 30 draft, effectively took the concept of a disciplinary provision out of where we had included it in grievance and discipline originally in Article 30 and created a new article on discipline. So we took your new article on discipline and we edited from there to be able to reflect proposed changes. So I didn't want there to be confusion because the format is different than, for example, the article we just looked at, where it shows no strike-through. That's not current language. That is
We're pretending
your
this
language.
isn't an article that exists and you're redlining a proposed article, right? That's how I understand
And
it.
reflecting agreement, right? Because effectively, what your new article did was propose the language. So the agreed-to language is just showing up as straight-up text
regular
without
text.
interlines or cross-throughs. So we've accepted your language, and then we've have additional proposals from there. And so I'll go through those. Yes, please.
So, Rick, one of the questions that you had when we met last Wednesday is under the authority of the chief on Section 1, that Section B that talked about members suspended for 3 days or less who appeal the suspension shall not serve the suspensions unless the suspension with loss of pay is awarded by an arbitrator. So to clarify that particular language, when we negotiated the police contract, if you were to go to the 2016 to 2021 police contract under Article 28 for disciplinary actions, Section 1, which is the authority of the chief, at the end of that paragraph, you'll find that language. But also, there was a subsequent section right below that alluded to that, pretty much indicating that suspensions of 3 days or less that were not appealed will be converted into a written reprimand if there was no other infraction, if you will, 2 years subsequent to the incident. Additionally, it also talked about suspensions that were appealed to the commission or the arbitrator by the officer were not eligible to be reduced to a written reprimand, and also that the original, the reduction of any suspension contained would not qualify for any reimbursement to the employee. We did away with that section. So the reason why that language was in the police contract was because there was a sequence of events that were removed. We should have removed that section from the police contract as it's no longer applicable, and that is something that we will be handling with the police union when we negotiate again. So from our perspective, is cleanup language that should have been removed that didn't get removed that is no longer applicable in the police contract. And that's why you see on the counter that we're proposing today that we are removing that language.
So taking it from that point and just going through, we're not including the board review of discipline and sort of walking through the practicalities of that and how it would work in practice. There are a variety of 143 concerns about confidentiality and proposed discipline and the proposed process, and as a result, not something we've included as part of our proposal. With regard to contemplated, we do include the service by mail for both contemplated and final discipline with a copy to the union as well. There have been specific instances where it's been problematic to get somebody served, and so we want to be sure that we have the ability to be able to follow through and hold folks accountable, and make sure that it's just not a procedural fault that keeps that from happening. So we've proposed that as well. With regard to additional language, we included back agreed discipline. We think that is a tool. It's an option. It's not something that has to be used. It's an option that works well, and whether or not an employee chooses to use it, that is within their right. And with regard to the last section, the others just relate to some procedural days and calendaring, and once Ricky has an opportunity to review those, it's truly just to make it a process that everybody's expectations are aligned, and we know what the deadlines are for arbitration. With regard to the one additional, other than just procedural sort of timeframes, was just to be sure that when there is an offer, and I think this is already included in one of our prior provisions involving our miscellaneous section, but if a suspension is the discipline proposed, and the member is considering whether or not to use the option of forfeiting leave in lieu of serving the suspension, that is something that would be up to the chief's discretion to offer, and based on the discipline that's at issue. And then as a result of that, it's the employee's decision whether or not they want to use leave in lieu of suspension and then not appeal. So that's effectively the finality of that. So an option that we have, and we've included that back.
Can I ask you about the honor board? So that's section, unless you ready for questions? Great. So the section 2 discipline process, we had proposed essentially a pre-disciplinary due process type hearing, internal at the department level. You are not agreeing to that, but indicating there are 143 confidentiality concerns. Is that what you said? I want to make
There's
sure.
a number of 143 concerns. I know you all have talked about effectively the rights of 143, and
Yeah.
so we're sensitive to those. But
Yeah.
yes, 143, variety of concerns, in conjunction with those, some confidentiality concerns.
What are they?
So 143.089G makes private certain parts of a personnel file with regard to things that aren't considered final discipline. And so ensuring that we abide by what 089G provides for is important to us. And we want to be sure that we've thought through, and this doesn't think through all the considerations for how that would need to be handled. And we want to...
If the member, so I would imagine the privacy issue is the member's privacy issue, and so if the member agrees to participate in the pre-disciplinary hearing process, doesn't that address any privacy concerns?
No, it doesn't, because it's not, usually it's not the sole issue. There's you've got a variety of factors that could be at play. You could have a variety of members who are either, witnesses or also, behaviors at issue. So there could be a whole range of circumstances that are invoked, as you would imagine in any disciplinary action that you've seen or participated in.
Okay. My sense is we'll probably just withdraw this proposal. If you wanted to have discipline referenced in some way in the contract that was a city suggestion, our preference is to stay with 143. We'll talk about it in caucus, but we're probably just better off keeping the contract the way it is.
Well, we would like to think that you'd consider additional options, but
we'll consider anything and everything that you put on the table, including the proposal to make something worse that's in Article 27 now. But we'll consider and respond.
I'm sorry, what about something worse?
The use of leave for discipline. I think the city's response from the member's perspective makes that worse than it currently stands in the contract now. Right? So we were just moving a housekeeping, proposal from one article to the next. You're allowed to review it and have an opinion on it, and I'm just noting that the city's response makes that benefit worse than it currently stands in the contract.
Well,
So
we
we'll review
will
it.
agree to disagree on that because, as we've outlined, we've included a variety of tools, Rick, that we've seen be useful throughout the years in
Okay.
other contexts, and so we would like to avail your members of those equally.
Much appreciated.
In an effort to sort of keep drafting somewhat understandable, we use the grievance proposal from you all as the basis of our counter proposal. So similar to the disciplinary actions, we haven't worked straight out of, well, we've worked off effectively the proposal that you gave us on Articles 30 and 31. So like the disciplinary article, we have shown where there's agreement as not underlined or struck through, and then where there's sort of additional work to be done, we've showed our interlines.
Liz, if I could,
Yes, sir.
just reading through it real quick, and it's just a cursory reading, it appears you struck nearly everything we added and just reinstated everything that y'all wanted. That's what it looks like. And
So-
as far as honor board's concerned, you guys use NDAs on a regular basis against our members. There's nothing that precludes the use of NDAs for honor board members.
Yeah, I can't speak to what you're talking about, Joe. So the fact of the matter is the proposed process doesn't take into the consideration the sensitivities involving 143.089G, and this is not a provision that we are interested in pursuing, and so we've drafted our response.
I would assert that that's not a fact. That's your opinion. Thank you.
With regard to Article 30 and 31, we have included the informal conference step.
Can I ask you about just the formatting?
Yes, of
You
course.
explained, I just want to make
Yeah.
sure I understand it.
Yes. Mhm.
Is there a darker blue that indicates, so it looks like there's language that's underlined in blue, language that's struck through in blue, and where there's language that is both underlined and struck through, right? We'll obviously compare this to the union's response, but that's going to reflect this is language that the union had included in its counter that the city is not interested in, right? That's when we see both, that's what we're understanding.
That's
that
what
to
we
be.
strive to do, Rick.
No, that's why, I mean, look,
Yeah.
no, this is a helpful conversation.
The short answer is
And
yes.
So, and language that is, just, is presented as underlined and stays underlined would indicate the city's agreement to that proposed language in the context of this.
So the language that's underlined is our edit to your proposal. If it's struck through, it's your proposal's language
All right.
that we've struck through, yeah. Yeah. So
Okay.
it seemed like that would be the easiest way to do it, to be able to reflect where there was already agreement, and then what we've proposed in response to that.
I don't think
So-
there's any one way that's better than any other way.
Yeah.
So I just want
So
to
if you have a
understand.
different method you'd like to use, we're certainly open to it.
Thank
But
you.
this was our attempt,
Thank
okay?
you, and I appreciate the attempt.
Yeah. So back to, we reinserted the appeal to city manager. We see that as a valuable step, and I think Maria spoke to it the last time when we walked through very specifically in the grievance process. So we've added that step, and we've also kept the informal conference proposal that you all included. We put a little more meat on it, so there's more specificity to it, but effectively agreeing with you that there is value in having that additional step in there.
Okay.
And with regard to submission to arbitration, and this may be something that, Ricky cares more about, but we did reinsert the days, and I think some of that was what we had included in our previous submission, so that there were timelines and expectations, and similarly, witnesses and expenses. You'll see some of what we had proposed initially, just again to give a little bit more firm expectations. And then we've got some Section 7 edits, as well as Section 8 refers to appeal, and the inclusion of the Section C in Article 31 about the 30 days.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So what we would like to do next is some clarifications on the packet proposal that we discussed last Wednesday related to floating vacation shifts, as well as the vacation leave buyback.
Okay.
So I believe, Rick, that you mentioned that what we had proposed in terms of adding the 2 floating vacation shifts,
Yeah.
one for fire and one for EMS, we understood that you felt that that was effectively what you were all proposing.
Yeah.
We think is different, so we just wanted to, if you can walk us through that. The way that we understood it is that it was more than what we counter
Okay.
with your proposal.
Sure. Do you want to talk about FVSs?
Sure. I'll talk a little bit about the FVSs then for y'all. So in our proposal, we propose to, and I'm pull it up here in just one second.
Take your time.
I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah.
We chose to move some FVSs around, right, is what we've done. It's, in essence, what's codified in contract right now, and we're adding a few more to that. Thank you. So Article 17, vacations, right? Under Section 3, we're talking about FVSs. Y'all's response was, our initial ask was for 10, we're correct? With 6 in suppression, 4 in EMS. Y'all came back with 6, 3 and 3. If you look at the next paragraph that we struck, that's talking about defined paybacks. Those were actually awarded to us in the arbitration. So that was 2 additional FVSs that were awarded in arbitration last time to be done as a defined payback. If you read there, it says that they were 4 additional employees, additional 4 employees will be allowed off. We're striking that, and we were moving that up into the previous paragraph. We're adding those into there. The defined payback was specifically not, hey, I'm paying back my FVS day on January 1 because I'm going to move my January 1 vacation day to March 1st. It was, if I were to say I want to move this defined payback that was given under arbitration, which was a Saturday date, I would have to find one of my Saturday vacation days to pay that back. We don't believe that that's relevant or necessary, and we just move those 4 additional FVSs up, and then if you look, that moves us to 10 and we added 2 more to give us 10, right? We had 8 already in the contract, right? And we're just moving that up to give us 10. Does that help?
I think so, Billy. We'll discuss internally, but I appreciate that explanation. So the other area that we wanted to clarify was related to vacation leave buyback. So we discussed the ability for firefighters to sell their vacation leave annually up to the amount that is allowed by the IRS. And I believe what we understood is that the response was we already do that. So we went back and just make sure that we were all on the same page. And what we do today is that there's a limit on the number of hours that can be sold back. And I believe, Renee, that's 160 hours per year. And so what we are proposing, is there's no limit to the number of hours. The limit would be based on the IRS. For instance, if an employee wanted to contribute more to the deferred compensation, or if they qualify to do additional hours because of their age or any other conditions, that they have the ability to do that. So we just wanted to clarify that, but we're open to dialogue in terms of there's something that we're missing on our end.
We'll talk about the sick. We'll talk about the sick. We'll talk about it in caucus. Thanks for the explanation.
Okay. The other item that we also wanted to talk about is you asked for the cost of the proposal that you provided to the city on the 20th. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to provide you that information today.
Great.
So there are two documents that we're passing to you.
Okay.
In the first table is effectively the cost of the proposal. So we included in there at April 20th, you propose a $14,000 increase to base, plus an across-the-board 4% for every year of the 3-year of your proposal. So what you see there, effectively, the increases to base pay or to wages is 30.8%, and you'll see the breakdown there between what the $14,000 equates to, and then the 4%. We also costed out the other items, that economic items that you proposed, and you see the list there, the overtime, the incentives, et cetera. And effectively, the cost of that is, in terms of wages, is about 8.1%. So you see there the total cumulative cost over year. We also costed out the addition of the fourth shift, and you made a change to your proposal to make the recommendation effective September 30 of 27. So if that was to be implemented, that would have an impact in 28 and 29. So you see there we costed out the 5-year of the proposal, which is $520.1 million, and you see the breakout there of the different components. Sure. What we also did is we are providing the wage tables that would be effective for every year of your contract proposal, a combination of the flat amount that goes into every single step and every rank for each of those years as you proposed it, and the 4%.
Thank you. So can I ask you, let's walk through the first sheet.
Sure.
The top number, well, the cumulative cost you have for FY25, the 44 million, that picks up, is that limited to the wage aspect, or does that pick up other cost components?
It includes the wages and the other items
Okay.
as listed at the bottom.
Okay. So do you know what the number is? I guess I might be able to see it, but what's the FY25 number just for the wages? Do you know? You're pretty good with numbers. That'd be pretty good if you knew that off the top of your head. But we'd like to know. So I
Sure.
think that, I mean, you've identified the wage adjustment.
Yeah, we can provide that breakdown
Yeah.
to you, so that's not a problem.
So it's whatever that 2.7% would be backed out of that, I would imagine, right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
Correct.
That'd be meaningful to us.
Sure.
And the 14.8% is a combination of the 4% adjustment and then the $7,500 adjustment to the pay schedule, right?
Correct.
Okay, great. And then it's the same thing in FY26, it picks up the $4,000 adjustment, and 27 the $2,500 adjustment.
Correct.
Okay. And in the second, the second set of numbers where you're breaking that down, you're just showing, okay, the $7,500 adjustment in year one is the equivalent of 10.8%. If I add 4 to that, I see the 14.8 up top, right? So that's what you're doing. Okay. All right, that's helpful. It's very helpful. And then the second document that you gave us shows the impact across different job titles, correct?
Yes, by rank and step.
Okay.
And one thing to point out, on the first page, for instance, the equivalent for the wage increase of fiscal year 25 is 14.8%.
Right.
And that is the average. When you look at the individual rank and step, the numbers are different, higher on the firefighters with a lower base pay and a higher increase and a lower increase for those with the higher pay.
And that
So-
reflects the fixed adjustment
Right.
as it impacts higher and lower
Correct.
pays expressed as a
Correct.
percentage. And then about 4% of the adjustment in the first year, let's say, let's use 14.8% number that you have. About 4% of that reflects the rolling in of pay that members currently receive and moving that into base pay. Is that right? About?
I don't think I'm following you. So, pretty straightforward. So for the salary of the firefighter, let's take step A. We take their wages for that particular firefighter, the annual wage for that is effective January 1 of 2024. And then we added the $7,500, and then we increased that by 4%.
Marie, do you happen to have the document that you gave us on the 19th?
Yes.
Do you have it? Okay. So the reason I asked that is I'm looking at the one that identifies the moving certification pays to base. And that's the $2,400 adjustment. And what that does is it takes pay that everybody receives now in, under different, headings and moves that into base so that we can have a more robust base salary, right? Okay. If I look at I guess it's the 5th slide of that, it's slide 5. It's on the 3rd page. It's the one that says impact to wages, firefighter rank, annual amounts.
Yes.
Okay. When I see under 2025, if we look at percentages, right? If we look at firefighter, step A, the starting pay, right? The city has proposed 4% raises in each of the 5 years, but we don't see 4% across the board, right? We see 8.3% in the first year. And that 8.3% represents the taking of the $2,400 that firefighters receive elsewhere and putting that into base, right? Okay. And at the firefighter rank, that ranges from 8.3% down to 7.7%. And as you've just explained to us, and as we know, because we're taking fixed amounts, those percentages are going to reduce as we go higher up the ranks in the fire department. But if I look at, 8.3, 7.7, it looks like taking the $2,400 and moving it into base is a way that we can adjust the base raise 4%. Is that fair? Or at least you understand how I'm understanding that? Okay. And so if we go back to the FY25 impact to wages that you've identified as 14.8%, again, that 14.8%, 4% of that, right, is reflecting the $2,400 that people already receive, right?
No.
No? I think it does, right? So in FY25, we've got a 4% raise, and then...
And I'm sorry, are you talking about your proposal or the city's
Yeah,
proposal?
you've costed out
You're talking about this?
Yeah, the document you gave us today
Okay.
expresses and accurately, I think, expresses the adjustment to base salary in the first year at 14.8%. And you showed us the different percentages that's going to reflect, across the board. But that 4% of that raise, right, is $2,400 that firefighters already receive. No? Well, if you look at the 14,000 increase.
And maybe we misunderstood your
Yeah.
proposal, Rick, because the way, when we propose moving the 2,400 to base on the city proposal,
Yep.
it was a 2,400 plus a 4%.
Correct, right?
So the way we understood your proposal is that you were accepting the city proposal. We talked about it was effectively just the $720 for clothing allowance and the $65 from reduced certification pays. So we understood that to be part of your $7,500.
It is.
Okay.
It is. We're exactly on the same page. But where the city I guess it's when we're articulating a percent raise, it's a percent adjustment to base pay and accurately reflected and described that way in what you've presented to us. In terms of a firefighter working in the street, if we take $2,400 that they're already receiving and put that into base, and we increase the wage schedule by 4%, that firefighter is going to feel like, right, they've got a 4% raise, even though the base salary will increase by 8.3 to 7.7%, right? So some of it's money they already have that's moving into base, right?
I don't know if I'm understanding you, but
Okay.
let me tell you how it is,
Yeah.
and you tell me if I'm articulating it the way that you are asking me.
Sure.
So for the city's proposal, we did the 4%, and then we moved money that already existed in clothing allowance and certification. That is separate and apart than the 4%. So
Right.
the increase on the city's proposal, for instance, if I take a firefighter step A, that increase of 8.3% represents the 4% that is the wage proposal of the city, plus moving the $2,400. Now, once that base increases with those existing amounts, then there's an impact on pension and longevity and the overtime rate.
And that's going to amount to, I don't know if anyone's hung a number on what those ancillary impacts might be.
So that
expressed as a
equates
percentage.
over the 5-year of the city proposal is 1.4%.
Over the 5? Okay. Yeah. So it's a, a small, it's certainly a benefit. It's a smaller benefit by moving things to base. It also helps us move the base. It helps the city with recruiting, with retention. There are lots of reasons why we're talking about
Right,
base
right,
pay. Okay, and I appreciate that. And in terms of the adjustment, these numbers are helpful. I think that the cumulative cost, just looking at the wage adjustment, will help us gauge the cost impact as well.
So what you're asking us is to give you a breakout of that, for instance, of the 44.4 million, correct?
Yeah, and I would say for 26 and for 27 as well.
Sure.
It's just breaking down, the breakdown between the total and costing out the other items. But you've got, so it's about 200 grand in the first 3 years, I think, without the ancillary items, it looks like. Is that right? 44 plus 70, 115 plus 90, 205.
Well, I'll
That's the
give you the
cost.
numbers so that way
Yeah.
we can break out the other components.
Yeah, okay. That'd be helpful. Great. Thank you very much. This will help us in our discussions.
Okay, so you also mentioned the last time we met the city's response to some of the economic items that you had proposed to us. And like we have mentioned in previous conversations, the city's focus continues to be on base pay. We hear the challenges of comparing our base pay to other fire departments, and the union proposed changes will increase other components of pay. So specifically, and I'll go down the list to address all the proposals you provided to us. Article 14, by increasing overtime, standby pay for fire. Article 15 of hours to increase standby for arson. Article 18 related to holiday pay. Article 20 increasing the uniform credit amount. Article 22 incentive pays increases. And Article 25 for health benefits increases to health savings account. So the city is not interested in increasing those items of pay. Again, our focus continues to be on increasing base pay. So today we're reasserting our wage proposal of April 20th of the 4% wage increase every year effective October 1 and moving the $2,400 from certification pays over the 5 years of the term. We're also reasserting the package proposal that we provided last Wednesday. And this includes the change to Article 14 for overtime, adding the 2 floating vacation shifts, 1 for fire and 1 for EMS, and also the ability for firefighters to sell their vacation leave annually up to the amount that is approved and allowed by the IRS. You asked for the dollar amount of the change to Article 14, and that is $3.7 million. We did the calculation based on calendar year 2013. You had asked me the last time, and we were initially looking at fiscal year 2013, but we changed it to calendar year 2013.
2023?
I'm sorry, 2023.
I mean, the way the numbers
Yes.
haven't changed much
Yes.
since 2013,
Yes.
but.
Well, no, they have changed, believe me,
Yeah.
quite a bit, especially on overtime.
But before I was snarky, calendar year 2023 is where
Calendar
you're
year
going.
2023.
Thank you.
So that 3.7 million equates to a 1.68% wage increase. So what the city is proposing today, if the association agrees with the change in overtime that I just described, plus the floating vacation shifts and the ability to sell back the vacation leave, that would move the wage increase to 5.68%, effective October 1, 2024, which is the first year of our proposal. The wage increases after that remain consistent with our previous proposal of April 20th at 4% for a 5-year term.
And would it be
And these are the actual articles.
that implements the proposal? Thanks.
Yes.
And is it fair to assume, consistent with your explanation regarding the impact to the city of changing overtime, that this is there's not a cost, a net cost to the city there, right? You're taking savings in overtime and you're putting it into base, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Is there anything else?
No, that's all we have.
Thank you so much. We're gonna caucus and review your responses. We appreciate the changes today. I'll describe it as movement because it is movement. You can move the deck chairs around on the Titanic, right? But you're moving it. From our perspective, we've had 8 bargaining sessions, and the city's economic proposal is essentially the same as it was on March 29th. And so we're concerned about that, but we're going to consider that counter in our caucus and determine whether a response is warranted today. Thank you.
Well, Rick, before we break, because we want to be sure that we hear your characterization, and that's not correct. And the fact of the matter is, we have been responsive to concerns we've heard from you all about base pay. We have looked at other pays, ad pays, premium pays, whatever you want to characterize them as, but effectively take-home pay for our firefighters, but in different amounts for different firefighters that everybody gets. And we've used what everybody gets in 3 instances from the prior pay proposal we gave you to take those existing dollars and move them into base pay and put more money into the contract because it does become pensionable, it does go into overtime calculations, and it goes into longevity. So there is new, real money that is different and increased from the first proposal. And you represented to us that you were in agreement with that, put a proposal on the table that purported to do the same but didn't. But in any event, we're still working with that. And today, understanding that, and you've heard from us from the very beginning, to help to mutually work towards overtime concerns. Hold on. We have increasing costs that we need to account for, and as a result, we have taken what we think is a way to solve that and propose language. We didn't put a proposal on the table for overtime because we wanted to be able to work through it with you all. That wasn't something that you have been willing to do at the table, so we put proposals on the table to be able to do that, but with the commitment that those savings would stay in take-home pay to our firefighters. And as a result, what you see today is a proposal that does that and makes that benefit equally applicable to all firefighters with an additional cost to the city in future years as a result of what base pay does, and we all understand how it works in compounds. So I couldn't let the characterization that we haven't moved from our initial proposal because that's just not the facts.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. And I appreciate everyone's efforts in the negotiations. And the reason I chuckled is because people have their phones on silent and some people have their phones on vibrate. And it's like a buzzing parade over here, all behind me at the minute you made the proposal, because we're doing public negotiations. There's firefighters in stations and at home that are watching this that are saying, we're not stupid. In addition to being brave, they also tend to not be stupid. All right? And so they understand when you're selling the money in their right pocket and telling them you're going to put it in their left. Okay? I think it's a road that we can go down to fix the base pay because everyone knows that's a problem. All right? But let's at least call it what it is. And so when I say that you really haven't moved since the first day of these negotiations, that's true. And I'm not the only person here who thinks that. And there's lots of people buzzing phones and sending texts who feel the same way. Now, we are going to, because we are bargaining partners and we are committed to getting a negotiated agreement, we're going to go back in that room and we're going to go through all these numbers and we're going to work hard to come up with a counter. But I'm not going to pretend at the table that there was any significant movement today. All right? And so that's the point that I want to make, and I want to be upfront with you and sharing that. I don't want to tell you, oh, gosh, this is great, thanks so much, when I know that nobody feels that way. So we're going to go talk about it. We are going to get you a response today. What time do you want to reconvene? You know what, let's...
Before we break, though, Rick, we want to be sure we have a huge amount of respect, not only for the firefighters in this room, but all the firefighters that are watching that may watch this now or later. So we're not going to let statements that imply that something else. And so huge respect, huge respect. The piece that is critical for us to think about is what the 4% represented when we made that proposal, which was an effort and real money to be able to keep our firefighter pay competitive in the state and in the city. And we want to be sure that the efforts we make are in consideration of what their priorities are, which we understand based on the comparisons you brought with flyers and that sort of thing, is base pay. And so we're working with real dollars to be able to make a difference there, and in a way that has meaningful take-home consequences as well. And so I don't think you characterizing it as taking from one pocket and putting it in the other is fair, because there are real money benefits from it and longer-term benefits for our employees, for our firefighters over time. And so the fact of the matter is there was a competitive proposal put in the beginning. We've continued to work on it. We've continued to figure out how to put real money into base pay with long-term benefits for all firefighters in a manner that's consistent with us being able to maintain consistent services for the city, for our community, that folks expect from us.
Thank you. Let's caucus. Let's say 1 o'clock. I'll text you if we need any more time. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more thing. Sorry. I'm just reading real time. And here's a comment from one of our firefighters that says that no one here at 45s today feels respected. They're all talking about the departments as other departments as employment opportunities. So I've said this before. I'm going to say it again. I'm going to continue saying it. Your firefighters and paramedics are talking to you. You're not listening. Thank you.
Joe, that is not true. We are listening, and as Liz mentioned, we have a lot of respect for the firefighters. We have to balance the other needs of the community. So it may not appear that that we're making movement, but we are. And I think that there are many firefighters that understand that by making changes to base pay and moving some of the overtime into base pay, there are other opportunities for them as their pension is going to increase, their longevity is going to be positively impacted, and those raises will compound over time. So those are real changes that the firefighters will benefit from.
Test 1 2. Test 1 2. Test.
Okay. We're back. Thanks for the responses that you provided this morning. We've taken a look at some of the numbers and some of the language, and so we want to show, we put a couple slides together that we put together in order to give you a sense of where we are and the framework with which we have understood and continue to understand the economic proposals made by the city. And so, we've talked about a lot, I think, so far in this process about the cost of living and about members struggling to maintain living standards over the last few years because of a combination of inflation and subpar annual raises. And that's not just during the period of the litigation extended period from 2014 through to arbitration, but really under the last 5 years of the interest arbitration award. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about CPI, and we also wanted to talk about expenditure caps. And this is all information that we hear from the members, and, when we're evaluating our proposals and city responses. And so let's go through it a little bit. And, what we've seen, right, over the years is the city holding out the importance or identifying the importance of inflation and CPI with respect to wage increases for the bargaining unit. And we've also seen the city certainly set and then maintain a goal of keeping public safety expenditures, police and fire expenditures below 66% of general fund expenditures. And that's nothing new to anybody in this room. It's a longstanding policy of the city, and it's certainly a cap that we've heard not just in city council, but we hear at the bargaining table, and we have in the past, and in our last round of bargaining we did. And, our proposals that we have on the table right now will meet those two goals that the city had pointed to, CPI and keeping costs below 66%. If the city accepts the proposal that we've made, it was made precisely in order to help firefighters keep up with increases in the cost of living in San Antonio over the last few years. And we'd still come in, at least by our calculations, below the 66% cap. And so people are struggling with why the proposal hasn't been accepted. And so, just to give a little bit of history on cost of living, when we were together in arbitration in 2019, the city presented a report, an exhibit from PFM, from Mr. Nadal, again, we talked about a couple of times. And one of the things that Mr. Nadal talked about during his presentation before the panel was CPI, and he put together a chart comparing San Antonio firefighter raises to increases in the South CPIW over time. And we've had discussions at this table about when we say CPI, what are we talking about? And we said we would focus in on South CPIW over time. And I think the point, I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I think Mr. Nadal's point was that if we looked at increases in CPI and we looked at San Antonio fire salaries, that firefighters had actually done pretty well with respect to CPI over the 20-year period before that arbitration. One of the things that was interesting with respect to the articulation, Mr. Nadal's articulation on behalf of the city of its proposal in arbitration last time, was to set firefighter raises so that they would be consistent with increases in consumer prices, right? So the city's offer will maintain this is the city's offer, not the firefighters. The city's offer will maintain San Antonio's position relative to consumer price change, high quality benefits, and competitive total compensation, right? So we have the city looking at CPI, projected CPI increases, and telling the panel, if you award the raises that we're suggesting, our firefighters will keep up with the cost of living, right? That was a goal that apparently was important to the city. And we know what's happened since then, right? We haven't kept up with the cost of living. And so we went back and recreated some of these numbers using CPIW for the particular period of time. And if we look from FY 14-15 up to to currently, what we see is that what we know, our wages haven't kept up with CPI. And so the number up top are increases in CPIW, right up to about 32% since 2014. And down at the bottom, we have our raises, which is basically 10%. Now, what we looked at in addition to those numbers was not just our wages, but the wages of everybody else in the area, right? And so this chart shows us not just the South CPIW increase of 32% and not just the firefighter raises all the way down the bottom, but we show Texas wage growth, for the same period of time. And then we look at wage growth in the San Antonio MSA over the same period of time. And, it's not identical, right? But we see that certainly Texas and San Antonio wages have risen at a rate that's much closer to CPI than firefighter raises have, right? So we're not just out of step with CPI, we're out of step with raises that other people have been receiving. We know earlier we looked at raises provided to other firefighters just even over the last year and a half, and we haven't kept up with that. And certainly the city civilians over the last few years, I think 16% or so over the last 3 years, we certainly haven't kept up with that. And so that informs positions that the members have taken. This is, information you've seen already, right? We polled our members, and our members, 97% of members, disagreed with the statement that their current salary keeps up with the cost of living in San Antonio, right? 3/4 of folks strongly disagreed with that. 92% disagreed with the statement, I feel I'm paid fairly for the work I do. And 99% considered the city's offer of 20% over 5 years inadequate, right? And so we think that the CPI numbers inform that, and that's not news. It shouldn't be news to anyone. But one of the things we're struggling with is it's not just us. We're not the only ones who are pointing to CPI as important. The city's done that in the past, in negotiations, in arbitration. And now that we're essentially looking to hold the city to that commitment, we haven't seen a willingness to provide raises that would at least help us make up some of the ground that we've lost. Because our current proposal does not make up all of the ground, but it makes up a lot of it. So we're concerned about that. The other thing we're concerned about is the cost of our proposal. And we appreciate the city being transparent. I think a number of occasions, right? A number of sessions through the negotiations so far, the city has provided costing numbers with respect to the firefighters' proposals. You've been forthcoming with your answers. We appreciate that cooperation as we're all trying to figure out how much does it really cost? How far apart are we? You're at 5 years, we're at 3 years. Sometimes that can make things complicated, but we appreciate the degree of professionalism that's been exhibited in these negotiations. And one of the things we wanted to look at is how the cost of our proposals would relate to the 60%, 66% public safety cap. And just as some history, whoa, look at that. Can you put that back on slideshow? Thank you. We went back and we looked again at things that we did in arbitration, not too long ago in 2019 and 2020. This is from the city manager's presentation, identifying the city's financial policy, and one of the most important ones being to maintain public safety spending below 66%. Again, that's not anything new for anyone in this room. Here's a pie chart that we've seen before, right, that the city renews from time to time. This was the pie chart reflecting that at the time that we were in negotiations last time, public safety expenditures totaled about 64.2% of general fund expenditures. And this is your proposal, your exhibit for your proposal in arbitration in 2019 and 2020 with respect to the 66% threshold, right? And this is quoting from the city's exhibit, the public safety costs, in your view, shouldn't exceed 66% of the general fund. And the city's proposal, that second bullet point is interesting. According to the city in your FY 2020 budget, that goal would be met with public safety costs at 64.2% of general fund spending. If the city's proposal in those negotiations was awarded, the city's costing model forecast that the spending balance would be maintained within policy levels at 63.9% in FY21 and 65% in FY22, right? So 65% was with the city's proposal. Our expenditures would be at that particular level, and that would be acceptable to the city. Now, our reality today, as you know, is that we're nowhere near 64% or 65% or 66%. Right? Public safety spending today makes up about 60% of spending, general fund expenditures. And these are numbers just from your most recent 6+6 report. So you know the numbers better than I do. And here's that pie chart again that we see. It's updated, reflecting police and fire expenditures for FY24 at $967 million, basically, and noting that that represents 60.5% of general fund expenditures. Right, so we're well below 66%. And, if we look at those numbers and we say, well, what is the threshold then for FY24 the 66% public safety cap would be about, right, $1,055 million. And so currently the city's sitting $88 million below that 66% threshold that you've identified as the goal. And we're, even $72 million below 65% threshold that the city said was acceptable in arbitration last time. And we're $54 million below the 63.9% threshold the city identified in writing as acceptable at the table with us in arbitration in 2019. And so that tells us that, you can spend, right, $88 million and still stay below your goal of 66%. Now, the numbers that you gave us today in costing out our April 19th proposal has a number of $44.5 million for FY25. And that's not just the percentage raises, it's any of the other economic improvements that you put numbers on. That number for year one is $44.5 million. If you accepted that, just said, yep, we're okay, that's going to set your public safety expenditures at 63.3%, right? For if we were taking that and measuring that, considering that in FY24 numbers, dollars, and that would be lower than you were, seeking to achieve in the last arbitration. And if you accepted our original salary proposal, which actually would have closed the gap with CPI, provided other improvements, that came in at under $50 million. If you just would have accepted the original proposal, you'd still be below 64%. And that's 64% measured against FY24 numbers. We know your projected 25 expenditures are higher, right? Or 1703 million. And so, we believe that our proposals are fair. We believe that the proposals are consistent with both parties' desire to keep raises in line with CPI changes. And we believe that our proposal is also consistent with the city's longstanding goal to keep public safety expenses below 66% of general fund expenditures. And, for those reasons, we'd ask you to reconsider the proposal that we made on April 19th. We think it's fair, and we think it would go a long way in healing the department and would give the firefighters fair compensation and still have a contract that exists within limits that the city has set and identified as acceptable. And so we'll thank you.
Thank you, Rick. We appreciate this additional context and, a few points that I want to make in terms of our financial position, the financial position of the City of San Antonio and the general fund. You may recall that we made a presentation to City Council on April 18, our financial forecast, 5-year financial forecast. And if you look back at that presentation, we have financial challenges in 27, 28, and 29. We're actually projecting deficits for those 3 years. So as we add more expense in the front end of the 5-year forecast in 2025, that would have a ripple effect and have those deficits will be even higher. So as I share with the association, the proposal in terms of our financials is not affordable because of those reasons that I stated in terms of our financial position. We understand your reasserting your proposal, and I think what the city would like you to explore as another tool, since we are still, there's a large gap between our proposal and your proposal, is to go to mediation and have the assistance of a professional mediator help us continue these conversations to get to a successful agreement.
Okay. We'll take the offer under consideration. We agree that we have not been making the progress we'd anticipated making at the table. We'll discuss whether we believe mediation makes sense, and we'll get the city a response. But I think substantively, we're probably about as far as we're going to go today.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you very much.
We will await your response.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wake up early to catch all the light in one day. I go out barefoot. The concrete's not warm yet. I can stay. Oh, as the sun dries the tears of the night from each blade of grass